The descendant of Shadow, had leapt into the future using the portal in May's grave with Shadow Mind in order to stop Shadow. 10 years have passed since then. Arriving in the future, the player finds out how the world they know had changed for the worse in the span of 10 years. All of these are the marks Shadow had left to the world in his attempt to alter reality and bring May back to life. Shadow has tainted his own image in people's eyes, from a respected hero to a despised tyrant. This is not just a story, it's our future. May heaven's light shine on us again.
No. This cannot be. This isn't the end too. The heralds will rise again.
The player emerges from May's grave. During the night, Shadow Mind asks the player if they can feel it, that they were a single whole once. It realized this when the player defeated it and they merged. Shadow split the player. That was how Shadow Mind was created. It was imprisoned inside the sphere, but now it is united again with the player, just like in the beginning. Shadow Mind suddenly vanishes. It then begs the player to stop Shadow before bidding farewell.
The player is approached by a woman, who asks them if they are really Shadow's descendant. She mutters that the herald was right, before introducing herself as Jet. She wonders if the player really can overcome Shadow, whom she hates a lot and refers to as a tyrant. On their way out, they dispose off the guards, which are none other than Shadow bots. Both of them also have to pass through the Legion Fortress, which has changed into a technologically advanced military stronghold, with cannons and missiles everywhere. The wardens that guard the area are also surprisingly adept in using shadow energy, the very thing Legion refuses to use. Used to refuse, at least, Jet informs the player about all the things that have changed. Shadow seized the Legion throne from the Queen. After that, bots became common in the Legion and the legionaries willingly started using shadow energy, to the point where shadow energy became like mother's milk for them. Things only got worse from there. Shadow eliminated everyone. Dynasty is no more, heralds are gone. Jet herself, her village was destroyed by Shadow's army when she was still a teen. She was forced to hide in a nearby forest with some other kids. When she returned, there was nothing left of her village, aside from ruins, ashes, and silence. Jet herself feels a bit like ashes since then. Jet comments that the player is indeed a good fighter, while also pretty good looking. She informs them that she knows where Shadow's lair is. Jet takes the player to the wasteland, where she promised to meet with her associates, and they will plan an assault together. However, no one is there when they reach the location.
Suddenly, E2 appears before them, angry at Jet for betraying him.
Jet. Stop that. I shouldn't have trusted you. You nomads have betrayal in your blood.
He had taken care of Jet's allies because they had planned to give the player away to Shadow. Ida had a deal with Jet to escort the player to him, but being a nomad, which according to Ita had inherited Dynasty's worst traits, she had betrayed him.
It is my pleasure to throw this pittance in your face. Herald. I'll bring him to Shadow in a silver platter.
According to Ita, they are greedy liars and cannot be trusted. Thankfully, Ita knows better. Jet tells Ita to shut up and makes an excuse that his payment is too low and she does not want to risk her life, as Shadow will do anything to deal with his descendant. Jet then proceeds to fight the player, but being a better fighter than her, the player defeats Jet. Ita swears that he will not make any deals with the nomads ever again. He states that this nostalgia for Dynasty will kill him someday. E2 also berates the player for thinking they can enter Shadow's territory that easy. The nomads saw the rigs glowing all over the wasteland. It was a sign of the player's arrival, so Ida had asked Jet to pick the player up.
The tower that you see is an accelerator of shadow particles. Shadow wants to destroy all the shadow energy.
The anomalies created duplicates. The only herald unit that checks the anomalies have been wiped off. The anomaly hunters are no more. E2 then points out the huge tower that radiates a shadow beam, which is Shadow's work. He then explains things to the player while taking them with him to the dome, which had been destroyed by Shadow as well. That tower is an accelerator of shadow particles. Shadow is preparing the global cleansing of shadow energy. And it means obliteration. E2 informs that splitting a single shadow particle will result in an energy blast, and there is so much shadow energy here.
Shadow invaded the dome to retrieve the accelerator core prototype. The rest is all around them, a spatio-temporal rift. Many heralds and shadow bots gave their lives here, including E2's squad, and the anomaly keeps replicating them. All of these shadow anomalies and temporal distortion prevailed here when Shadow slightly hit the void room once. E2 says the accelerator is like 100 void rooms turned inside out. It forms time and space outward, into the whole world. Shadow plans to recreate the whole world using the accelerator. The preparation is complete, but he still hesitates. E2 deducts because something might be missing, but he does not know how much time they have, if any. Therefore, he asks the player to come with him to the void room and ask for the way to take down Shadow. E2 then tells the player it was he who gave the accelerator core prototype to Shadow. He regretfully says that he had no choice and he was desperate to end the bloodshed. E2 knew Shadow was up to no good, but he had the slightest hope of saving his fellow heralds, only to be left crushed in the end. The void room is cloaked, hidden somewhere. Only Bolo knows how to open it. The real Bolo, as E2 states. Bolo traveled time a lot, and one clone was formed in each jump as a side effect. All the Bolos the player had met before were those clones. They then visit Bolo, who lives in a stabilized part of the dome. E2 greets him as it has been a while, before telling him that he brought the descendant of Shadow here. Bolo gives a bitter response, telling E2 to stop making a local attraction out of him and that this Shadow's descendant is nonsense and has never existed. Bolo states that Shadow killed May and his descendant before the child was even born. Shadow Mind was the only thing left of the baby. Bolo then accuses E2 of clinging to the past. E2 does cling to it. He says he will make Shadow pay and Bolo will help them before requesting him to show them the void room. Bolo warns them that Shadow is powerful and the accelerator made him invincible. They cannot change anything. E2 argues that they can change everything. The player is here at last, and they are Shadow's descendant as the void room called them. Bolo replies by saying the void room also called E2 a dome redeemer, before sarcastically asking him where is the dome and the heralds now. E2 desperately tries to convince Bolo that the void room was right. Bolo then tests the player to a duel, saying that the player should not be affected by his temporal tricks if they really have Shadow Mind with them. Said temporal tricks are Bolo's capabilities in bending time to flow according to his will. He can parry any attacks delivered by the player by enhancing his own reflexes, reverse back time in order to return his health to the full state, and stops everything around him. However, with the power of Shadow Mind, the player can overcome all of Bolo's tricks and they win against him. Bolo theorizes that the player must be Shadow's child, due to Shadow Mind behaving humbly inside of them as if it was theirs originally. Shadow hates the player, May died because of them and Shadow will destroy the player on sight. Bolo is finally willing to help the player and E2 open a void room, but he wants to show the player first that their attempts to change everything are a waste of time. Bolo orders the player to give the player his spare time travel suit, which the player can use to travel to the past. But they cannot go to the future with this suit. Bolo had tried to change the past many times, and he always ended up returning to this timeline. Bolo then orders the player to replace some shadow bots in their timeline. This is a cruel business, but this has to be done in order to avoid mass paradox. After all the preparations are complete, the player now can start the time travel. Since E2 could never forgive himself for giving the prototype to Shadow and he thinks this can be changed, the player travels to the past where E2 is heading to give Shadow the prototype. After past E2 is stopped, Bolo takes the player back to the present times using Rectangle of Dimensions, which can bring the player back any moment. E2 corrects him that it is a cuboid, in which Bolo replies that it is all a matter of perspective. E2 is confused as to why they are not starting the time travel, as they must detain Kibo in the past. E2 claims that he was beaten by a stranger, and Kibo snatched the prototype and gave it to Shadow. Confused at first, everyone realizes that the series of events had been altered, but the ending result did not change at all. Shadow still got the prototype. Bolo wants to show this once again and he orders the player to stop Kibo and destroy the prototype. After past Kibo is stopped, the player is taken back to the present times again. Once again, E2 asks Bolo why they are still waiting and not starting the time travel. Bolo informs the player that the Rectangle of Dimensions allows him to recollect memories from all timelines. E2 cannot do it, which is why he forgot that the player already did the time travel twice. This ability to recollect memories is what makes him the real Bolo. Stopping Kibo did not change anything significant as well.
You devised a single plan and it failed spectacularly. The future I saw cannot be changed. I tried it too. But time finds its way to bend every single thing, making the end inevitable. Go on, try again. Yet to fail.
Why? What is happening? Can't we stop Shadow? Can't the Descendant change the future? Is this the end for us heralds?
E2, still not knowing the player had time traveled twice, tells the two to stop fooling around and stop Iolanta already before she passes over the core prototype to Shadow. Bolo finds it funny that even the brave and stubborn Iolanta admitted defeat to Shadow, as he had prepared her to become the next Sphere Keeper. Iolanta had been trained by Bolo since she was still a kid, to handle Shadow energy and made her immune to the influence of Shadow Mind. But when Marcus returned, Iolanda stole the prototype from Shibata and brought it to Shadow. The player travels to the past time once again to stop Iolanta from delivering the prototype. After past Iolanta is stopped, Bolo takes the player to the present times again. He hopes the player now knows how he feels before apologizing for giving the core prototype to Shadow. E2 hopes his reason is worthy and tells Bolo now that he has a chance to make it better. Bolo reveals that he had been trying to change something so many times before he realized this. Shadow brings the world's end in any possible scenario. It is not the world that needs to change, it is Shadow himself.
They are lucky that the Void Room was damaged much less than the dome. Bolo opened the Void Room, and E2 asks the room the way to defeat Shadow. The Void Room suddenly goes nuts, and it creates a projection of Moira, Iolanta's twin sister the player found in Shadow Island begging for help. E2 is surprised to see Moira. He contemplates that Moira was with June, and wonders if they could possibly still be alive. E2 then shouts the room to tell them where Moira and June are. The Void Room responds by teleporting the trio to the Legion Fortress. Before anyone could figure out what Void Room is trying to tell, they spot Jet captured and dragged by legionaries. E2 then asks his friends to help her, as even though she had done many despicable acts as a nomad, he cannot let the Legion end her fate here. After the trio takes care of the guards, they cannot find Jet anywhere. Bolo witnessed an enforcer grabbing her and dragging her into the arsenal, but he was busy fighting to even do anything.
Help me. These bastards are going to get the little girl.
E2 does not take this well, as he knows their chief is Mendel.
The trio immediately barges into the arsenal to rescue Jet. Aside from Jet, there are two other people in the room, the Corporal of Eraser, the Legion unit responsible for Dynasty destruction, and the Chief, Gizmo, whose body is cladded in metallic black armor with half his face turned black. After all these years, Gizmo still recognizes the player, and he is happy to see his old friend again. The player then takes care of the Corporal, leaving Gizmo alone. Gizmo commends the player's boldness to come here. The chain of command never meant anything to the player, but he is sure the cleansing will change their tune. Bolo is disgusted to hear that the legionaries do actually believe in this cleansing business, stating that Gizmo is really out of his mind. Meanwhile, Jet warns Ito to rush to the ruins of Dynasty Palace to save the little girl. Ito finally gets what the Void Room is trying to tell them, as the little girl could be Moira. Gizmo suddenly cuts their talks, saying that the Corporal's eraser troops are on their way already. Shadow needed the child, and Gizmo claims he will become the ruler of Legion if he can give the girl to Shadow, and the cleansing will follow. Gizmo then challenges the player once again to recall the good old days. The player fights Gizmo. Gizmo had avoided death many times, all of which were caused by shadow energy overdose, resulting in his current condition. He is now much stronger than his past self. Gizmo can absorb the player's shadow form, damaging the player and making himself entering shadow form instantly. After all these years, Gizmo is still a fan of hand-to-hand combat. He will utilize shadow shields when in shadow form, which he treats like breast knuckles, emphasizing his love for bare hand fights. In the end, the player turns out better than Gizmo, and they prevail against Gizmo once again. With Gizmo knocked out, Jet explains that the little girl is living with the nomads, and she is not growing up. She overheard that the whole squad is after her. The group then rushes to find Moira because if Shadow gets her first, it will be over. This marks the beginning of Chapter 7, Part 2.
Moira has a mysteriously strong affinity to shadow energy, capable to even speak to Shadow Mind. She is also the source of power in the Shadow Island. And despite her childlike appearance, Moira is actually very old, as she has been living since a long time ago, even before the Legion was founded. Her weird conditions are still a mystery, although it is implied that Shadow must have done something to her. Moira can be seen holding a pendant.
I have not been completely honest with you. I am the reason this is all happening, the reason everyone is suffering. I am Moira. I am doomed to kill what I touched. My powers might be just too much for the world to bear. Long ago I was infected with Scourge when shadow beasts attacked my homeland. I was nearly dead. Shadow was the only one who helped me. He took me to a distant island, where I became a source of their shadow energy. My life has been only an experiment to Bolo. He made me bleed, made me touch the sphere. He wants me to take the shadow mind and destroy it. But even contact with the shadow mind was torture for me. It felt as if my whole body was torn apart. Even I cannot control my powers. If Shadow hadn't known about it, none of this would happen. One fateful night Bolo made me do something. He wanted me to talk to the sphere. That night I saw through its eyes. I saw the night when Shadow killed May. His tears. His guilt. Their pain. I saw the shadow mind had no intentions to kill May. He was searching for a host. It could not have spread its lonely voice. It could not interact the way it can now. I saw that the entity can think. It has its own mind. Before Shadow thrust his sword into May, it combined with a baby in her stomach. It had Shadow's blood, hence the perfect host. Shadow used his magic to prison the being into a sphere. But it too did make a move. A move that even Shadow did not see coming. It opened a time portal in May's stomach. It teleported the baby through a temporal space rift. The child grew into a person in the rift and it threw the child far into the future as an adult being. That's why the descendant have no past. The shadow mind hoped for the descendant to combine once again. When the descendant saved me from the island, I tried to kill them. I don't know why. Was it because Shadow told me not to leave? The creatures from the sea. I summoned them. I am sorry. For everything.
Following the events in the first part, the Descendant and his companions found out from Gizmo that the Legion has located Moira, and she is crucial for the cleansing. In this part, the Descendant will finally face Shadow, in a deadly battle that will determine the fate of the world. The party's search for Moira leads them to the ruins of Dynasty Palace. Along the way, Jet explains to the group about how the Nomads found Moira. Shadow energy was once sapient, it talked to humans and manipulated them. But one day, it stopped talking. And then the wastelands started breeding moths and other kinds of freaks. The Nomads fought them until they found Moira in the palace. She was wandering there while blabbering something when they found her. The likes of moths stay away from Moira. The group reached the deserted bazaar of the capital, where the palace can be seen from afar. E2 is shocked to see the palace standing like brand new, as he was there when the palace got destroyed 10 years ago. After the party made it past the corporal's scouts who crowded the bazaar, Bolo explains about Moira. She is an abdicator, the legionary royals who do not inherit claim to the throne. They are isolated and raised as zealots. Shadow brought Moira to Bolo once for a remedy to cure her of the scourge. Bolo says that Moira was a weird girl, and she touched the sphere once. The party finally reaches the palace, which looks peaceful and unscathed at all. Jet is perplexed by what her eyes are seeing, as, like E2, she clearly remembers that the palace is supposed to be destroyed currently. E2 also thinks he is seeing things now, as he sees Marcus there. Turned out that this is really Marcus, who is glitched yet again. Upon seeing Bolo, Marcus accuses Bolo that all of this is caused by him and starts attacking. After a closer look, Marcus recognizes the Descendant and E2.
Wait. Is it really you? E2 Descendant. Come closer.
He then tells them he was trying to warn the Emperor about Shadow's attack. Moira ran out at that moment and he spoke to her, but Marcus cannot remember what happened clearly after that, aside from Moira screaming. After E2 confirms to him that Shadow did attack the Dynasty 10 years ago, Marcus is then confused as to how can this happen. He assumes that this is another time loop and he is the cause before Bolo informs that this time it is Moira's doing. She cast a kind of a dome of parallel reality, inside an invisible barrier between the Dynasty Palace and the outer world. June comes outside, and she is delighted to see her friends here. The Emperor had passed away peacefully, and June will be coronated as the Empress. June invites everyone to come inside before she notices that everyone is startled.
E2. Marcus. And you, my friend. So you know already. I am glad to see you. Father would have been proud. Let's not waste any time. My coronation is about to begin. What is wrong with your faces? My land would be waiting to see me.
After she gets to know what happened, June says that she has to see her land with her own eyes. Jet is enraged by these unfair circumstances.
Your land? I am all that's left of it. You left us nomads die in the decay while you are relishing at the palace. You don't
She yells in June that the Nomads and Wasteland are all that is left of the Dynasty. The Nomads were hunted and killed while June and her people lived a happy life inside this utopia. They defended Moira and lived a tragic and disheartening life as they ate rats and bugs and were killed by both enemies and diseases, yet Moira protected the nobles instead. Jet has enough of this and she wants to teach June a lesson of suffering. The Descendant quickly steps in and fights Jet to stop her. Jet fights with her agility and swiftness, utilizing glass-like barriers she conjures with shadow energy to perform evasive maneuvers and sneaky attacks to trick the Descendant. Jet is defeated regardless, but June finally believes everything and she sees Jet's point of view. She does not deserve to be Empress after everything that has happened. Jet, however, begs for June's forgiveness. She wanted to restore the palace and revive the dynasty, to the point where she was willing to hand over the Descendant to Shadow, solely to persuade him to leave the Nomads alone. E2 asks June where Moira is. She tells him Moira was taking a walk in the garden a few hours ago. When they all check there, Moira is nowhere, and Bolo concludes that she is gone. Instead, they find a scared turquoise fox, an ally of Jet. He admits that Shadow was here, and he has slain everyone, every single of them. He is spared only because he gave Moira to him. Hearing this, June is angry towards Shadow, saying that he must pay for all he has done to the Dynasty. The party then tries to head to the accelerator, but they are stopped in their tracks when they arrived at the bazaar. The erasers have crowded the place. Alongside them is Gizmo, who sarcastically comments that the descendant has the talent of popping up whenever he has an urgent business. He taunts the party by saying that Shadow got the child already and the erasers will erase this place. The army is proven too many for them, and if they keep on staying here, they will run out of time. Bolo tells the descendant that he has to go to the accelerator now. They then bid farewell to each other. The descendant, escorted by Bolo, goes to the accelerator to save the world. While Ito and Jet, together with Marcus, assist June to defend the palace from Gizmo and his army. The descendant and Bolo reach the valley, where the accelerator is located. Bolo reveals that the descendant is the missing part of the cleansing, their shadow mind to be exact. Bolo once fought his own self from the future, and he learned important information. Shadow mind cannot be destroyed, but it can destroy this world and create a new one from scratch. And Bolo told Shadow about this. He regrets this and questions himself if Shadow energy studies were really worth it for him. Bolo did not tell this earlier, as Ito will not let the descendant leave if he knows. Bolo is sure that the descendant does not want to spend their whole life hiding from Shadow, and he is tired of this too. Bolo then encourages the player to not be afraid, who knows if maybe Shadow Mind will empower them somehow. The descendant and Bolo march to the top of the accelerator tower, where they confront Shadow. Upon seeing the descendant, Shadow remarks that Bolo is not a useless, old madman after all. Bolo corrects him as the descendant comes here on his own accords, and they will fight him. Moira, who is there as well, recognizes the descendant and pleads to Shadow to not fight them, as they are the friend who had saved her from the scourge.
Please, don't hurt them.
Shadow tells Moira that everything will be over soon. They will create a new world together and Moira will have new friends in it. The final battle between the descendant and Shadow then begins. Shadow asks Moira a favor, to take Shadow Mind from the descendant and put it into the accelerator core. Moira pleads to Shadow to stop, as she does not want to do this, only for Shadow to ignore her. He threatens the descendant by telling them to prepare to die before he hops into a giant robot behind him. Shadow enters it and controls it from the inside. The robot is very huge and sturdy, and it is armed with energy blades in both its arms and a pair of missile launchers on its shoulders. Even though it moves and attacks very slowly, the robot is steady as a rock and does not recoil from the descendant's attacks. However, Shadow Mind has a trick up his sleeves. As Bolo has predicted, it empowers the descendant to fight Shadow. The descendant's shadow energy regenerates by itself thanks to Shadow Mind, and every time they enter shadow form, Shadow Mind emerges to shoot out a beam of shadow energy forward. After taking enough hits when it starts getting damaged, the robot charges towards the descendant to grab them. But, the descendant dodges this by hopping onto its arm and jumps over the huge robot. Shadow Mind then blasts it from above with a shadow energy beam, sending the robot all the way down to the floor below it, and the descendant then lands just right beside it. With the robot broken, Shadow gets out from it and fights the descendant with his martial arts skill. Shadow's combat prowess is proven to be very deadly, as he delivers whirlwinds of punches and kicks to the descendant. He is capable of keeping up with the descendant, even without wielding any weapons at all. Shadow also utilizes a rechargeable shield which protects him from attacks. This is quite problematic as the shield requires a considerable amount of hits, damage to be destroyed. And even then, Shadow can easily recharge the shield again. Eventually, the descendant manages to overcome Shadow thanks to Shadow Mind's help. Shadow is cornered and exhausted, as the descendant approaches him. He then barely stands up on his feet again to continue fighting. Seeing this, Moira runs towards them before they can approach each other in an attempt to stop this. However, Moira briefly loses control over herself and with her power, unleashes a shockwave that pushes both the descendant and Shadow away. This causes Shadow Mind to rises out with a physical form. When it realizes this, Shadow Mind tries to attack Moira. Shadow quickly shields Moira and tries to stop Shadow Mind, and as a result, he accidentally fuses with it. Shadow then enters Shadow form and with his new godlike powers, continues the fight. The tide of the battle has been turned, the descendant loses all the power granted by Shadow Mind, and Shadow now has obtained unimaginable powers. He can conjure many weapons and use them to attack the descendant. He could also make Shadow Mind emerge from himself and shoot out a shadow energy beam through it in a huge radius. Despite the huge power difference, the descendant finally manages to defeat Shadow after a long struggle and emerges victorious. Shadow returns to his human form as he died. Moira runs towards Shadow and starts crying over his death. Feeling huge grief, Moira completely loses control over herself. Her eyes glow with shadow energy and she pushes the descendant away, knocking them out. Moira then levitates and forcefully pulls Shadow Mind out telekinetically from Shadow's lifeless body. Shadow Mind desperately tries to free itself from Moira's grasp as she throws it into the core. Moira is successful, and the accelerator starts the cleansing. It releases a huge shockwave and evaporates the entire world in shadow energy.
The world is destroyed, killing everyone in it, including the descendant. Shadow Mind regains its consciousness. It is wondering where is the descendant, as they are the reason for its existence and it cannot lose them. Suddenly, a stranger speaks to it, telling it that they are dead, just like the whole world. Shadow Mind is in the accelerator core now, and it has the absolute power to create a new world and be the ruler in it. The descendant should be its least concern now. Shadow Mind replies by saying it does not need such a world, where the descendant does not exist. It is incomplete without them and it will suffer once more, just like when it was in the sphere. Shadow Mind plans to use its power to turn back time. Having learned from his past experiences, Stranger informs Shadow Mind that it will only yield the same outcome regardless. But, there is a way to change fate. Stranger reminds it that the descendant had performed 3 time travels to the past, which created 3 alternate worlds as a result. Each one of these 3 planes has its own descendant copy. Not an exact one, as they will not remember Shadow Mind. Descendants never realized how important their companions were for the world's fate. Shadow Mind will help the descendant to understand and learn a lot of things. Once they obtain their companion's power, the descendant will be able to change fate. This means Shadow Mind will be trapped in the sphere again, but the descendant will surely find it sooner or later. And because these are alternate planes, these copies are much weaker than the original, and the path will not be easy. Shadow Mind then fades and enters the portal to the first plane.